Today we're going to be talking about the different powers of Congress. Congress is actually the most powerful branch in government. There are 3 types of power given to Congress. The first are the expressed powers, and these are the powers actually stated in the Constitution. The second are the implied powers. These are not actually written down, but we know that they're there because Congress has to have them in order to carry out the expressed powers. The third type are the inherent powers, and these are general powers that all governments have, such as passing laws, declaring war, and regulating immigration. There are 9 powers expressly given to Congress. These include taxing, borrowing money, regulating commerce, money powers, creating post offices, issuing patents and copyrights, creating standards of measure, establishing lower courts, and defense and military powers. First up, we have the lovely power of taxing. Taxes are that little chunk of change that comes out of your paycheck every 2 weeks, and the government takes it and uses it to fund programs such as the military, social programs like Medicare and Social Security, to pay government paychecks, and in general just keep the government running. Sometimes states and local governments will also collect taxes, but usually this is in the form of sales taxes and property taxes. Congress also has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Unfortunately, the government tends to spend more money than it brings in, so we usually have to borrow money from other countries. We tend to borrow a lot of money from China. Another way that the government borrows money is by selling savings bonds and treasury bills to American citizens. If you purchase a savings bond, you're actually giving the government a little loan, and then eventually they will give you the money back with interest when you cash the bond in. The money that the government owes at any given time is called the national debt, and I'm sure you've heard we are currently in a national debt crisis. Congress has actually tried to stop the debt from growing by establishing a debt ceiling, or a maximum amount of debt we can have. Unfortunately, every time we reach the debt ceiling, Congress just passes laws to raise the debt ceiling more and more. To put this in perspective, the sum of all of the debt of all the nations in the entire world is at about $69 trillion. The U.S. national debt is currently over $20 trillion, which means that the U.S. alone makes up almost 1/3 of all of the debt of all of the nations in the world. This is not good. Congress also has the ability to regulate commerce. You can think of commerce as just economic activity, trading and transportation of goods. And Congress can regulate this commerce between foreign nations or between states, and also with Indian tribes. Congress also has money powers, which means that only Congress can print or coin money in the United States. Now, some people say, hey, if our national debt is so bad, why don't we just print more money and pay it off? Well, if money grew on trees, it wouldn't have any value. It must be rare in order to have value. So that's why Congress has to be very careful about how much money they print. Congress also has the ability to establish bankruptcy laws. When a person is unable to pay his or her bills and debts, that individual is considered bankrupt. Congress also has the ability to create post offices and post roads. This isn't really necessary anymore, but a long time ago, snail mail was the only way to communicate, so people had to use the Pony Express through the National Post Office. Nowadays, with things like UPS, FedEx, and of course the internet, we don't really need to use the post office as much anymore, but it's still around. Congress also has the ability to issue patents and copyrights. A copyright is an author's right to exclusively publish or sell his or her own work. So if you were to write a song or a poem or anything like that, you would want to have a copyright placed on it to make sure only you could publish or sell your work. If anybody else were to publish or sell your work, they would have to pay you, or there may even be a lawsuit involved. A patent is very similar, but it allows an inventor the sole right to make and sell their creations. So for example, Apple has hundreds and hundreds of patents on the iPhone. This means that no other company that makes phones can take Apple's ideas, copy them, and use them on their own phone. Congress also has the ability to create standards of weight and measures. Weights and measures have to be standardized because this means, for example, a 5-pound bag of sugar in Iowa is going to weigh the same as a 5-pound bag of sugar in Florida. This makes buying and selling goods a lot easier because they are standardized. Congress also has the ability to establish lower courts, which are the federal courts just below the Supreme Court. This is part of the system of checks and balances, and this power is given to Congress through the Necessary and Proper Clause. This also allows them to decide what constitutes a federal crime and even to establish the FBI. The final powers are defense and military powers. The president actually shares defense and military powers with Congress. For example, even though the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, only Congress has the right to declare war. This is just another piece of the system of checks and balances. So those are the 9 expressed powers given to Congress in the Constitution. There are also other powers that inherently belong to Congress, and we're going to talk a little bit more about those in the next video.